Let me set one thing straight off the bat. I'm not here to adjudicate the stories of Timothy Treadwell from Grizzly Man.
I love them with all my heart. I will protect them. I will die for them.
And Chris McCandless from Into the Wild.
I don't need a new car. I don't want a new car. I don't want anything.
Okay.
Just these things.
Okay.
I'm going to criticize them, sometimes harshly, and the arrogance they both displayed in their thirst for danger and power and ego. Their romanticization of nature which lacked respect.
If I look at it from my culture, Timothy Treadwell crossed a boundary that we have lived with for 7,000 years. It's an unspoken boundary, an unknown boundary, but when we know we've crossed it, we pay the price.
But really, I want to show how, to paraphrase Grizzly Man director Werner Herzog, the images in these films are the images in your life. I'm going to explain how all of us, Werner Herzog and myself included, exhibit arrogance, this very human tendency towards domination and subjugation, brought on by the colonial and humanist mindset infecting our collective consciousness. I want to explore a more sustainable and harmonious way of engaging with the natural world, what I consider to be the greatest gift in life. Human arrogance is a core tenet of our species. We see ourselves as separate from the natural world, superior to animals that haven't learned how to dominate their environment.
The trees here are in misery and the birds are in misery. I don't think they sing, they just screech in pain.
This arrogance seeps in not only to how we treat the natural world, but how we treat other cultures, traditions we don't understand, beliefs we don't agree with, ancient wisdom we see as primitive. This attitude lends itself towards seeing the world and its resources as existing for our own consumption, rather than as a interconnected and complex web that we are but a mere cog in. Despite many recognizing the ills of this attitude, it's impossible to avoid the waste, excess, and ecological damage of our inherent focus on growth at all costs. Treadwell and McCandless are tragic figures. For all their mistakes, they did not deserve the gruesome deaths that came for them. They were deeply troubled and used nature to escape their problems. But therein lies the problem, using nature.
Of course we are challenging nature itself and it hits back. It just hits back, that's all. And
nature does not exist as an exploit for our own escapism. And Into the Wild and Grizzly Man show how even somebody who considers themselves an environmentalist can go to nature with the wrong intention. People in pain do dumb things, and we should strive to learn from these two stories, rather than to romanticize or belittle them. I have not figured life out, not by any means. But I've had my own experiences with escaping to nature after being depressed and mad at the world. But looking back on it, I never mistook nature as being the only factor that led to my healing. Solitude in nature is esoteric and profound, but its value on this 3-month road trip that I took was really as a place to work through my own mental health. If you go to nature with some romantic notion that it will heal your soul all on its own, you're going to end up disappointed. If you're sad in your life, you might just find that you end up sad in nature. In this video, I'll examine the mistakes that humans make in their arrogance, but I'll conclude it by presenting my philosophy for how to engage with nature in a respectful and harmonious fashion. I'll also preview part 2 of this video, in which I'll discuss the dangerous trajectory of the psychedelic renaissance, a cultural movement in which we're repeating the same mistakes of indigenous exploitation and capitalization of healing, and why we need to be very vocal and steadfast in ensuring that we don't fall into the same trap that turned coca leaves and cannabis and tobacco and even opioids into harmful commodities. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying so far. If you enjoy the video, I do hope you'll consider subscribing. I'm actually in Hong Kong right now. I moved here for the next 9 months. So if you want to hear more about that, stick around until the end of the video. Anyways, leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and enjoy the rest of the video. I have a deep respect for the natural world. It's one of the core values that I live by. And if you listen to Timothy Treadwell's words, so did he.
I love them with all my heart. I will protect them. I will die for them. But I will not die at their claws and paws. I will fight. I will be strong. I'll be one of them. I will be the master. Still a kind warrior.
But he was a liar. He was selfish, delusional, and driven by ego. A man who crossed boundaries that are never crossed.
You know, he tried to be a bear. He tried to act like a bear, and for us on the island, you don't do that. You don't invade on their territory. When you're in their territory, you know you're there, and when you're nearby, you make sure that they know you're around. You know, for him to act like a bear the way he did would be, I don't know, to me it was the ultimate of disrespecting the bear and what the bear represents.
Treadwell called himself an environmentalist, a lover of animals and their sole protector in a world that would seek to harm them. But if he stopped for a moment to think critically about what he was doing, or to listen to those that advised him towards more healthy expressions of naturalism, he would understand that he did immensely more harm to his beloved bears than good.
When you habituate bears to humans, they think all humans are safe. Where I grew up, the bears avoid us and we avoid them. They're not habituated to us. If I look at it from my culture, Timothy Treadwell crossed a boundary that we have lived with for 7,000 years. It's an unspoken boundary, an unknown boundary, but when we know we've crossed it, we pay the price.
Timothy Treadwell was an extremely troubled and deeply misguided man.
I'm in love with my animal friends. I'm in love with my animal friends. In love with my animal friends. I'm very, very troubled.
He saw himself as a hero and increasingly saw everybody else on the outside as enemies.
I beat your fucking asses. I protected the animals. I did it. Fuck you. Animals rule. Timothy conquered. Fuck you, Park Service.
Now, I want to be respectful of his mental health because it was obviously a core component in the regression to a childlike state of mistrust and his eventual death. However, I'm not going to let him off the hook for that reason because I think that it's good for us to examine why people do these types of things. Grizzly Man delves into Tim Treadwell's psyche at length, and while I am by no means a mental health expert, we can draw a few conclusions that the film makes obvious. First off, Tim was an alcoholic. He films himself talking about his alcoholism here.
I used to drink to the point of that I guess I was either gonna die from it or break free of it, but nothing, Iris, could get me from to stop drinking, nothing. I went to programs, I tried quitting myself, I did everything that I could to try not to drink, and then I did everything I could to drink. And it was killing me until I discovered this land of bears.
Andrew van der Vaart, a psychiatrist with an excellent video on Grizzly Man, linked in the description, claims that rather than address the root of his alcoholism, he instead replaced alcohol with another addiction, bears. The reason why he chose bears are layered, but when we look at the benefits he gains from them, it makes complete sense.
But so we see another thing that living amongst the bears does for Timothy Treadwell. Not only does he have the immediate experience whenever he's able to sort of turn away a bear, and avoid harm, that is an immediate feeling of power. So he has that. 2, he's going to develop this belief that he's actually the only one trying to save the bears, so he has a kind of purpose and cause. And 3, he's getting social validation and celebrity from this lifestyle. So what he's finding is that this pursuit is doing so much for that ego need.
I'm no bear expert either, but from what I've read, the conflict and resulting mutual respect from these interactions was all in Timothy's head. Really, if bears are well fed, they're unlikely to risk attacking even a human. Even something like a minor wound could spell disaster for a wild animal should it get infected.
So there's almost this fantasy of a push-pull relationship he has in some of these cases. He definitely likes the feeling of sort of winning in a confrontation over a bear, but then he also has this kind of fantasy that they love him, right? It's not enough that they fear him. He wants them to both fear and love him.
Would I rather be feared or loved? Easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me.
So the push-pull is, get away, don't do that, and then I love you, I love you, I love you.
The film also touches on Timothy's experiments with drugs and hints at what his possible mental condition might be.
One time he went to a doctor and they wanted to put him on some kind of a antidepressant or something to keep his mood, because his moods were so up and down. And he started taking it for a while, and then he stopped. And he said I had to stop. And I said, why? And he said, because I can't stop. I can't have the middle ground. I have to have the highs and the lows. It's a part of my life. It's a part of my personality. And he definitely had a dark side. I mean, he was mixed up in drugs, which makes you mixed up in bad people. And
clearly, Timothy's mental state contributed to his confounding decision to live amongst grizzly bears every summer for 13 years, and his subsequent regression to childlike tantrums, his increasingly risky behavior, and his me and the bears against the world delusion. But I believe Timothy's story reflects a deeper and more sinister attitude wrought on by colonialism, capitalism, and the very human necessity to be on top. A lingering attitude of white people to see themselves as superior to minorities, indigenous peoples, and even nature. Zoltgiori, I hope I'm getting that right, describes Timothy Treadwell as, quote, a dreamer who can surely be listed as a Herzogian conqueror of the useless. After all, what can be more useless than getting yourself killed for something people and you yourself do not fully understand? Tim Treadwell's disrespect and arrogance crossed a boundary between man and beast, a boundary Werner Herzog is all too eager to point out.
I discovered a film of human ecstasies and darkest inner turmoil. As if there was a desire in him to leave the confinements of his humanness and bond with the bears, Treadwell reached out, seeking a primordial encounter. But in doing so, he crossed an invisible borderline.
In the film, you see lots of footage where he steps very close to a bear, and with his own camera, you see his hand touching the face of a bear, and he sings songs to bears and wants to hug the bear. And it's a tragic misunderstanding, philosophical misunderstanding of what wild nature is all about.
Treadwell would be the first to tell you that he was prepared to make this sacrifice, his life, for the quote-unquote good work that he was doing and the protection he was providing for the bears. He constructed this delusion that he was somehow the only one capable of protecting these bears, despite all his summers taking place within Katmai National Park, a designated protected land where bears are just not threatened. Treadwell's delusions of grandeur are on full display with his construction of a conflict with the evil park rangers that wish harm on the bears. Werner Herzog puts it best when he says,
There were visitors every now and then, but for Treadwell, they were just intruders, an encroaching threat upon what he considered his Eden. Even the Park Service itself became an enemy because of its restrictions.
I have decided to violate a federal rule which states I must camp 1 mile. Every week I must move 1 mile after staying for 7 consecutive days. If I was to do that here, I would not be able to study these bears. I would not be able to really protect them. I'd have to actually move out of the bay to get a mile out.
Treadwell goes on to rant at the Park Service, which is hilarious to me, because if you're going to criticize the government, the Park Service is one of the least problematic agencies to target. But in Timothy's head, they were challenging him, whatever that means, and they were in collusion to bring about the destruction of bears or something. His whole argument is pretty incomprehensible.
I came here and protected the animals as best I could. In fact, I'm the only protection for these animals out here. The government flying over a grand total of 2 times in 2 months. How dare they? How dare they challenge me? How dare they smear me in their campaigns? How dare they? When they do not look after these animals. And I come here in peace and in love, neutral, in respect. I will continue to do this. I will fight them. I will be an American dissident if I need be. There's a patriotic time going on right now, but as far as this fucking government's concerned, fuck you, motherfucking Park Service.
But the point of Grizzly Man is not, haha, let's all laugh at this nut job who wanted to be a bear. Werner Herzog says that, quote, "My honest belief is that the images in my films are your images too. Somehow, deep in your subconscious, you will find them lurking dormant like sleeping friends. Seeing the images wakes them up, as if I am introducing you to a brother whom you have never actually met." None of us are immune to this arrogant behavior. I can't say that it's human nature per se, but it's certainly a modern human tendency. But the best way to combat your own arrogance is to be aware of it. Look deeply enough and you will find a plethora of examples within yourself. I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit that it was only after visiting Hawaii 2 times with my family that I learned about the dark history of the U.S.'s illegal annexation and how indigenous people claim to this day that tourism doesn't respect their ancestral land. I knew the broad strokes, but I never really made the effort to truly understand. I'm regretful of this, not only because my experience in Hawaii feels shallow in retrospect, but because I also feel icky for having traveled for my own amusement without really trying to engage with the culture at any deeper level. I went to the beautiful beaches to bask in their sunshine and salty swells, but I did not fully grasp the demolition of culture by the more civilized Americans. I did not respect the fact that to this day, development for the sake of tourism not only degrades the environment, but disrespects Hawaiian values of aloha aina, or connection to and love for the land, community, and lokahi, balance, unity, and harmony. Quote, that the visitor industry would be so blatant in promoting Hawaii via cultural images and ideas, and not support to any greater degree the perpetuation of authentic and living a Hawaiian culture and language in the local communities, is another expression of cultural prostitution. Indigenous exploitation is a pervasive and little respected issue in today's political climate. Many think of colonialism as ending with the fall of the British, German, Japanese, and French empires in the aftermath of World War II. And while it's true that we're well past the heights of imperial superpowers, the colonial mindset persists in the way that humans treat the other. It persists in Africa, it persists in Hawaii, it persists in Mexico, it persists in Vietnam, to name just a few. In part 2 of this video, I'm going to be discussing indigenous oppression and exploitation through the story of Maria Sabina, as well as the subsequent psychedelic revolution. I'll discuss Karl Marx's concept of commodity fetishism and how the psychedelic renaissance, for all its promise, in many ways does not respect the sources and ancient wisdom of indigenous peoples who have used these substances for healing for thousands of years. I'll talk about a better, more ethical, more mutually beneficial way to engage with psychedelics through Catherine McLean's film In Progress, Almost Visible. I love Werner Herzog's Grizzly Man, But I do take some issue with Herzog's incessant need to force his opinion or contextualization of nature onto the viewer. One of his more powerful quotes about nature describes it as such.
And what haunts me is that in all the faces of all the bears that Treadwell ever filmed, I discover no kinship, no understanding, no mercy. I see only the overwhelming indifference of nature.
Or this from the documentary Burden of Dreams about the making of his film Fitzcarraldo.
Of course we are challenging nature itself, and it hits back. It just hits back, that's all, and that's grandiose about it, and we have to accept that it is much stronger than we are. Kinski always says it's full of erotic elements. I don't see it so much erotic, I see it more full of obscenity. It's just, and nature here is vile and base. I wouldn't see anything erotical here. I would see fornication and asphyxiation and choking and fighting for survival and growing and just rotting away. Of course, there's a lot of misery, but it is the same misery that is all around us. The trees here are in misery and the birds are in misery. I don't think they sing, they just screech in pain.
The important part I want to note in this rant is the quote, "Of course we are challenging nature itself." If you don't know about this documentary, it chronicles Herzog's honestly fucking batshit insane effort to literally pull a massive steamboat over the mountains of the Amazon rainforest in Peru. He puts indigenous lives in danger for the sake of spectacle, and it's telling that when he challenges nature itself, it hits back. Maybe there's something to be said here for the fact that nature becomes, in his words, base and vile, and the birds screech in pain when Herzog attempts to dominate it. Herzog speaks of nature as cold and dangerous, but fails to recognize the harmonious warmth achieved by the unseen and, dare I say, unfathomable forces that drive it. Yes, nature is brutal and dangerous for the ill-prepared, as we'll see with Chris McCandless, but there's something spiritually significant in its balance. Herzog seems hell-bent on convincing the viewer of the ontological differences between man and beast. And I think this is just as much a humanist mischaracterization as Treadwell's. Humans are nature, and the moment we stopped recognizing this fact and convinced ourselves that we were somehow better than nature or more evolved than animals is the moment we doomed ourselves. Humanism is a branch of philosophy signified by an emphasis on the human realm, as the name implies. What this means is that philosophical inquiries with a humanist lens focus first on how questions impact human freedom and well-being and progress. But what viewing the world through a humanist lens leads to in practice is narcissism, arrogance, disrespect of nature, egoism, and if you ask Amy Césaire, hope I'm pronouncing that right, fascism and colonialism. Quote, "At the end of capitalism, which is eager to live out its day, there is Hitler. At the end of formal humanism and philosophic renunciation, there is Hitler." Césaire argues that humanist philosophy leads to not only thinking of humans as superior to nature, but of white humans as superior to minorities or indigenous peoples. He pulls in several examples from humanist philosophers to prove this point, such as this from Renan. Quote, "We aspire not to equality, but to domination. The country of a foreign race must become once again a country of serfs, of agricultural laborers or industrial workers. It is not a question of eliminating the inequalities of men, but of widening them and making them into law." So what's my point in bringing all this up? We've talked a lot about human arrogance in this video, about human supremacy to nature, about ego, about fundamental misunderstandings of the world, about the colonial mindset and how it pervades even after the fall of empires. This toxic interpretation of the world is not only misaligned with nature, but because humans are nature, it is misaligned with being human. It's difficult to know exactly when things started going wrong for us. It's possible that it was the very moment property and civilization began, as Jean-Jacques Rousseau would say. But I'm not going to advocate for a return to the state of pre-civilization or pre-medicine or pre-agriculture, even if those things were possible. After all, these advances allow me the freedom to spend my time reading and writing and thinking and exploring and challenging myself, rather than spending every waking moment thinking about food or shelter or water. By the way, I understand that this is a privileged position to be in, and I'm not trying to diminish anyone's suffering who does think about these things, but for a larger majority than not, these sorts of anxieties are not on the forefront of the mind as much. What I am advocating for is for each and every one of us to do better. To stop thinking of ourselves as separate from nature, but at one with nature. I'm advocating for approaching new ideas and experiences, especially ones you don't agree with or don't understand, with an open mind rather than judgment. I'm advocating for a completeness of being, attained through love and compassion for your fellow humans and for nature. Because at the end of the day, love overcomes hate, being overcomes doing. Or to quote Lao Tzu, movement overcomes cold, stillness overcomes heat. All right, thank you again, everybody who stuck around until the end. This was a marathon of a video, and I recognize that. It ended up being a whole lot longer than I intended. That's why it's been so long since my last video. So that is gonna do it for me. Like I said, make sure you subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope that this was enjoyable as it was for you, as it was for me. Wait, that doesn't make sense. I hope this was as enjoyable for you as it was for me to make. It might be a bit of an erratic schedule going forward for me, for the reasons I've already mentioned. But I'm gonna do my best to keep bringing you guys good content. By the way, hey, we hit 2,000 subscribers since the last video, so I think that does it. I think that's gonna do it. Peace and love, and I'll see you next time.